is the last few days of summer, and I'm outside getting what we call in Trinidad the last lap. Even if you're not Trinidadian, I know you can figure out what that means. But I wanted to talk to you today after a minute about the remains. Do you see what I have here? I just have a little bit of water left in this bottle. And in Trinidad culture, we use the word dregs. I am down to the dregs. Now, I had to look up that word. I wasn't sure if it actually is a word, but it is. And dregs means the remains, the remnants, what is left. And so often in life, if you're anything like me, you have been in a situation where you were down to your last dollar, maybe your last amount of food, maybe your last bit of energy, of hope, of faith. And I want to talk to you about a God who delights in using what remains.
Welcome to In the Word, a devotional segment to get you started on your day. And I'm your host, Dr. Kathy Ann Hernandez, also known as Dr. H from Value What Matters. And now, the Word.
I don't know where this message finds you today, but after the last few years that we have been through, the COVID-19 pandemic, have you gotten to the point where at times you feel as though you're down to your last bit? Whether you're facing financial issues, your business is struggling, or you are having difficulty in your relationships with your spouse, with your loved ones. Maybe you are feeling as though you lack clarity about what God wants you to do next, and you're just at the end of your hope and your faith. And so I want to encourage you today with this message, which has blessed me over and over again. In 2 Kings verses 1-7, we read the story of a widow who was down to the dregs. She was down to the remains. In fact, she came to the prophet Elisha and said, "My husband is dead. And the creditors, the people we owe, they are threatening to take my sons as slaves." And Elisha said to her, "What do you have in your house?" And she said, "All I have is a little bit of oil left in a jar. I'm down to the remains, the remnants, the dregs." And Elisha says to her, "Take this and go ask your neighbors for jars and fill them and ask them to give you empty jars. And you just keep pouring that oil into those jars." And we know the story. It was multiplied and multiplied, and she was able to sell the oil and pay her debts. And so I want to talk to you about a God who delights in using what remains. And I don't have to talk much, but we see much because we see the evidence in the Bible. Do you know the story about the boy with 5 loaves and 2 fishes? And the multitude that was fed, and then there were 12 baskets left over. Do you know the story of the widow who Elisha's predecessor met? Elijah, the widow of Zarephath, who had a little bit of flour and a little bit of oil left. And Elijah said to her, "Okay, take it, make me a loaf first, and then you feed your son." And the oil and the flour multiplied. And so 3 lessons we can learn from these stories about when you are dealing with what remains. 1, be prepared to surrender all to a God who delights in using what remains. Both cases, the widow surrendered all and God multiplied it. We can trust him that he is going to take us through. Second point is we must be prepared to sow where we want to go. When I say sow, I mean invest, pour it into a venture. If God has placed a purpose on your heart and you have a little bit left, a little bit of energy, a little bit of resources, we must be prepared to take that leap of faith, trusting that God is going to do what he has promised. And the third point, use what you have to get what you need. You might think that you don't have much. When I left my home country of Trinidad and Tobago, I came to the US. I had sold everything I had except for what were my clothes that were in 2 suitcases and the money that I paid for my first semester. And God has multiplied it. And so we must be prepared to use what we have to get what we need. What do you have? In both instances, the prophets ask the widows, what do you have? And even if you're down to the dregs, God can use that for his glory. So I want to encourage you today, regardless of how your circumstances might seem to you, as though you're running on fumes, you're running on empty. I know someone, he's got you. And he's in the business of using what remains and multiplying it for his glory and for your blessing. Have a great day. Take care, and remember to value what matters. Take care. Bye.